There's a state you remember, or think you remember, though it feels so distant now that you wonder if you're romanticizing something that was never as simple as you recall. Inner calm. Not the aesthetic version, not the curated moments of peace you see performed on social media, complete with perfect lighting and carefully chosen props. Not the temporary reprieve that comes from finally collapsing after days of pushing too hard. Not the numbed out feeling after hours of scrolling or binge watching, where you're not exactly calm, but you're too depleted to feel anything else. Real inner calm, the lived experience of your nervous system genuinely at rest, your mind not racing toward the next thing, your body not holding tension you've become so accustomed to that you barely notice it anymore. A state where you can simply be here, fully present, without that constant low-grade activation humming beneath everything you do. When was the last time you actually felt that? Not for a moment, but sustained. Not forced through breathing exercises or meditation apps that feel like work, but naturally occurring because the conditions of your life allowed it. Inner calm used to have space to exist, days where nothing urgent demanded your attention, evenings where you weren't still mentally sorting through work, weekends where you could actually rest instead of using your time off to catch up on everything you couldn't do during the week. Relationships where you could sit together without filling the silence with content or conversation. Mornings where you woke up without immediately reaching for your phone to see what you missed while you slept. Those conditions feel archaic now, not because they're impossible in theory, but because every structure of modern life works against them. Inner calm requires your nervous system to believe it can power down, that nothing requires immediate attention, that you're safe to stop monitoring, stop preparing, stop being ready. But modern life never gives that signal. It keeps you activated, keeps you alert, keeps you in a state of perpetual low-grade emergency that feels normal because it's constant. And in that state, inner calm isn't just difficult to access, it's become almost physiologically impossible. Think about what your nervous system experiences in a typical day. The alarm jolts you awake, and before your eyes are fully open, you're reaching for your phone. Not consciously always, but habitually. The first input of the day is information, messages, notifications, news, problems that aren't yours but feel urgent because they're presented as urgent. Your nervous system, still transitioning from sleep, registers each input as a small activation, a microstress. Nothing dramatic individually, but they stack. One notification, then another. An email that requires a response, a message that creates a small obligation, a news headline that triggers concern. And these activations don't release, they accumulate, building throughout the morning into a baseline tension that starts to feel like your natural state. Breakfast happens while consuming more information. You're scrolling through feeds, reading articles, watching videos. Your brain is processing stimuli designed by teams of engineers to capture and hold your attention. Your nervous system is tracking, evaluating, comparing. Even though you're sitting still, even though you're technically resting, your system is activated. Not at full capacity, but not at rest either. Somewhere in that middle zone where you're alert enough to respond to inputs, but not calm enough to actually settle. The commute, whether you're driving or taking transit or walking, is filled with more stimulation. Podcasts, music, audiobooks, something, anything to occupy the gap. And if it's not audio, it's your mind already working through the day ahead, what needs to be done, what problems might arise, what conversations you need to have. You're not present during the commute. You're already at work mentally, preparing, strategizing, activating systems that won't be needed for another 20 minutes, but can't be turned off once they're engaged. Work itself is a series of interruptions disguised as productivity. You start a task, and before you can build any momentum, there's an email, a Slack message, a meeting, a question from a colleague. Your attention is constantly being fragmented, pulled in multiple directions, never allowed to settle into anything deep enough that you could lose yourself in it. And each interruption is another activation, another small hit of cortisol, another moment where your nervous system has to shift gears, assess priority, respond to a demand. By mid-morning, you've context switched dozens of times. Your brain is tired but wired, exhausted but unable to rest, because rest requires sustained attention on nothing, and you haven't had sustained attention on anything, much less nothing. Lunch is eaten at your desk or while scrolling through your phone. More inputs, more activation. The gap that used to exist between morning work and afternoon work, that buffer where you could mentally transition, has been eliminated. You're continuously engaged, continuously processing, continuously activated. And your nervous system, designed for intervals of stress followed by recovery, never gets the recovery phase. It just moves from one activation to the next, the baseline slowly ratcheting up until what used to feel like high alert now feels like normal. The afternoon is more of the same. More emails, more messages, more meetings, more tasks that feel urgent but aren't really urgent, that feel important but aren't really important, but demand your attention anyway, because everything demands attention in a system where responsiveness is valued over thoughtfulness. You're producing, yes, but you're not thinking deeply about any of it. You're skimming across the surface of multiple things, giving each one just enough focus to move it forward without ever engaging with it at a level that would require calm. And then the day ends, or is supposed to end, but the line between work and not work has blurred so completely that you can't tell when you've crossed it. You're off the clock, technically, but you're still checking email, still responding to messages, still thinking about work, because work has colonized not just your time, but your mental space. It's not that you want to keep working, it's that you don't know how to stop. Your nervous system is still in work mode because work mode doesn't have an off switch anymore. It just runs continuously because the demands are continuous and the expectation is that you'll be continuously available. The evening, which should be rest, becomes a different kind of activation. You're consuming content, streaming shows, scrolling through social media, playing games, reading articles. And all of this feels like rest because it's not work, but it's not restful. Your nervous system is still processing stimuli, still tracking information, still engaged at a level that prevents it from actually powering down. You're not working, but you're not calm either. You're just redirecting your activation toward different inputs. Entertainment instead of productivity, but activation nonetheless. Even your relationships have lost the capacity for calm. When you're with people, you're not fully there. Part of your attention is on your phone, checking for messages, scrolling through feeds. Part of your mind is elsewhere, thinking about work, worrying about tomorrow, processing the hundreds of inputs you consume throughout the day. You're physically present, but mentally fragmented. And that fragmentation prevents the kind of deep, settled presence that used to allow calm to develop in shared space. You used to be able to sit with someone in silence and have that silence feel comfortable. Now silence feels awkward, a gap that needs to be filled, because your nervous system has been trained to expect constant stimulation, and silence, which is where calm lives, registers as wrong. Bedtime becomes another source of stress instead of relief. You're supposed to sleep, but your mind won't settle. It's still processing the day, still worrying about tomorrow, still activated by all the inputs you consumed right up until you closed your eyes. You scroll through your phone, trying to tire yourself out, but the blue light and the content just activate you more. You try to force sleep, but sleep can't be forced. It requires that your nervous system believes it's safe to let go, and your nervous system doesn't believe that because it hasn't been given any evidence that letting go is safe. Every signal throughout the day has said stay alert, stay ready, stay activated. And now, suddenly, you're asking it to do the opposite, to power down completely, and it can't. So you lie there, exhausted but wired, your body desperate for rest, but your mind unable to stop. This pattern repeats day after day, week after week, until the accumulated activation becomes your new baseline. What used to feel like anxiety now feels like normal. What used to feel like calm now feels like something's wrong, like you're forgetting something, like you should be doing something. Your nervous system has adapted to living in a state of perpetual alert, and that adaptation is what makes inner calm feel impossible. Because calm isn't just the absence of stress, it's a state your body remembers and returns to when conditions allow. But if you never experience those conditions, if you're never truly at rest, your body forgets what calm feels like. The neural pathways that support calm atrophy, and what should be your natural resting state becomes this foreign thing you're constantly reaching for but can never quite access. There's also the collapse of transitions. Inner calm used to have room to develop in the spaces between activities. You'd finish work and there'd be a commute, a buffer of time where you weren't working but also weren't yet home. A space where your mind could wander, where your nervous system could gradually shift from work mode to rest mode. Now there's no buffer. You close your laptop and you're immediately in personal time. No transition, no space for your system to recalibrate. You carry the activation of work directly into your evening, and it sits there, unprocessed, keeping you on edge even when there's nothing to be on edge about. The same thing happens in reverse. You wake up, and within seconds, you're consuming information. No gentle transition from sleep to wakefulness, no quiet morning where your mind can ease into the day, just an immediate flood of inputs that activate your nervous system before it's fully ready to be activated. And that abrupt transition sets the tone for the entire day. You start activated and stay activated because there's never a moment where you're allowed to not be activated. Even leisure has been colonized by productivity culture. Rest isn't just rest anymore. It's recovery for better performance. You're supposed to optimize your downtime, track your sleep. Measure your recovery. Follow routines designed to maximize the restorative benefits of your rest. And while optimization can be useful, it also means you're never actually resting. You're still performing, still measuring, still evaluating whether you're doing it right. And that self-monitoring, that constant assessment, keeps your nervous system activated. You can't drop into inner calm when part of your mind is tracking metrics, trying to optimize outcomes, treating rest as another form of work. The spaces that used to reliably offer calm have been infiltrated too. Nature, which once provided an escape from stimulation, is now mediated by apps that track your steps, your heart rate, your elevation gain, your pace, your progress toward fitness goals. You can't just walk. You have to log the walk, track the data, turn the experience into metrics. And in that quantification, the actual experience of being in nature, the slowness, the presence, the way calm naturally emerges when you're surrounded by something larger than yourself, disappears. You're there physically, but mentally you're still in performance mode, still tracking, still optimizing, still unable to simply be. Social media has amplified all of this beyond recognition. Every platform is engineered to keep you activated, to keep you scrolling, watching, engaging. The algorithms learn what captures your attention and serve you more of it. And what captures attention isn't calm. It's outrage, novelty, drama, conflict. Content that triggers an emotional response strong enough to make you stop scrolling for a moment before you move to the next thing. Your feed is optimized for activation, not rest. And the more time you spend on these platforms, the more your baseline shifts toward that activated state. You start expecting stimulation, needing it, feeling uncomfortable when it's not there. And the content itself keeps you on edge. You're not just consuming entertainment, you're consuming other people's curated lives, their highlight reels, their achievements, their experiences. And each post is a subtle comparison, a reminder of what you haven't done, haven't achieved, haven't experienced. Your nervous system registers this as a threat, not a physical threat, but a social one. You're falling behind, missing out, not measuring up. And that feeling, that ambient anxiety about not being enough, not doing enough, not having enough, keeps you activated even when you're supposedly relaxing. The news feeds work the same way. Every headline is designed to trigger concern, to make you feel like something urgent is happening that you need to know about. And maybe some of it is important, maybe some of it genuinely affects your life, but most of it doesn't. Most of it is events happening elsewhere, to other people, in contexts you have no control over. But your nervous system doesn't distinguish between threats you can respond to and threats you can't. It just registers threat and activates. And when you're consuming news constantly throughout the day, your system is in a perpetual state of low-grade emergency about problems you can't solve, situations you can't influence, crises you can't affect. And that chronic activation, that constant state of ambient concern about the state of the world, makes inner calm impossible, because calm requires your system to believe, at least temporarily, that everything is okay. And nothing about your daily information diet suggests that everything is okay. Work culture has also made calm impossible in ways that go deeper than just the hours you're expected to be available. There's a valorization of busyness that makes calm feel like laziness. If you're truly calm, if you're genuinely at ease, there's an assumption that you're not working hard enough, not ambitious enough, not taking things seriously. Calm is suspicious. It suggests you're not engaged, not committed, not hustling. And in a culture that measures worth by productivity, by constant motion, by always having something urgent you're working on, calm becomes not just difficult to achieve, but difficult to justify. You can't admit to feeling calm without it sounding like you're not doing enough. So even when you have a moment where calm could emerge, you fill it. Not because you want to, but because leaving it empty feels wrong, feels like wasted time, feels like you should be doing something productive with it. And that compulsion to always be doing something, always be working towards something, always be improving or optimizing or achieving something, makes the space where inner calm could develop unavailable. Because inner calm doesn't develop in doing, it develops in being, in the absence of striving. In moments where you're not trying to get anywhere or become anything or accomplish anything, you're just here. And those moments are increasingly rare because you've been trained to see them as wasteful rather than essential. The always-on nature of modern communication has contributed to this too. You're never truly unreachable. Your phone is always on, messages come through at all hours, work emails arrive at midnight, text messages from friends expecting immediate responses pop up during dinner. And while each individual interruption is small, the cumulative effect is that you can never fully disconnect. There's always this background awareness that someone might need something from you, that a message might arrive that requires a response, that you need to stay alert, stay available, stay ready to engage. And that awareness, that low-level vigilance, prevents your nervous system from ever fully powering down. Because powering down means being unavailable, and being unavailable means potentially missing something important. So you stay available. Always. And in staying available, you stay activated, always. There's also the way your identity has become tied to productivity and achievement in ways that make calm feel threatening. You're not just your work, but your work is a significant part of how you understand yourself, your accomplishments, your output, your progress toward goals. And calm, which requires you to stop doing and just be, feels like a pause in that identity. Like if you're not actively working towards something, actively improving, actively achieving something, then you're not being who you're supposed to be. The doing has become so central to your sense of self that being, just existing without purpose or direction or goals, feels empty. And that emptiness is uncomfortable. So you avoid it. You fill it with more doing. And in filling it, you eliminate the space where inner calm could exist. The culture of constant self-improvement has made this worse. You're supposed to be optimizing everything: your morning routine, your diet, your exercise, your sleep, your relationships, your productivity, your mental health. There's always something that could be better, some area where you could improve, some version of yourself you could be working toward. And while growth is valuable, the constant pressure to always be improving means you're never allowed to just be okay with where you are right now. You're never allowed to stop and say, "This is enough. I am enough. I don't need to optimize anything else." Because the moment you stop optimizing, you're falling behind. Not improving means declining. Standing still means losing ground. So you keep pushing, keep striving, keep working on yourself. And that constant striving, that perpetual dissatisfaction with your current state, makes inner calm impossible. Because calm requires acceptance of this moment as it is, acceptance of yourself as you are. And you can't accept what you're constantly trying to fix. Your physical environment has also been engineered against calm. Homes that used to be places of rest have become extensions of workspaces. You work from your couch, your bed, your kitchen table. The boundaries between work and rest have dissolved spatially as well as temporally. There's no room that's just for rest, no space that your nervous system associates with being off duty. Everything is multi-purpose. Every space is potentially a workspace. And that means your system never gets the environmental cues it needs to fully relax. It's always on some level alert because it doesn't know when it's supposed to be working and when it's supposed to be resting. The signals are too mixed, the boundaries too blurred. Even the design of your technology works against calm. Notifications are designed to interrupt, to pull your attention away from whatever you're doing. The red dots, the badges, the sounds, the vibrations, all of it is engineered to create a sense of urgency. Something needs your attention. Something is waiting. Something requires a response. And your nervous system, which evolved to respond to urgent signals, can't distinguish between a notification about a work email and a notification about a social media like. It treats them all as demands, as small emergencies that need to be addressed, and addressing them becomes automatic, compulsive. You check your phone hundreds of times a day, not because you consciously decided to do it, but because your system has been trained to respond to those signals. And each time you respond, you're activating, fragmenting your attention, preventing your mind from ever settling into anything deep enough that calm could emerge. The loss of boredom has been catastrophic for inner calm. Boredom used to be the gateway to calm. Those moments where nothing was happening, where you had nothing to do, where your mind was free to wander without direction or purpose. In that wandering, calm would eventually emerge. Your nervous system, deprived of external stimulation, would turn inward, would settle, would find a kind of rest in the absence of demands. But boredom has been pathologized now. It's treated as a problem to be solved immediately. The moment it appears, you reach for your phone, pull up a video, start scrolling, find something, anything to fill the gap. And in filling that gap, you eliminate the conditions where calm could develop. Because calm doesn't arrive in the presence of constant stimulation. It arrives in the absence of it, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the moments where nothing is asking for your attention and you're not seeking anything to occupy your mind. But understanding why boredom datters requires understanding what actually happens in those empty moments. When you first stop consuming inputs, when you first sit with nothing to do, your mind doesn't immediately calm. It rebels. It presents you with a cascade of thoughts, worries, plans, regrets. All the things you've been distracting yourself from processing start surfacing. This is uncomfortable. This is why you reach for distraction. But if you stay with it, if you don't immediately fill the gap, something shifts. The cascade slows. The thoughts become less urgent. Your mind, given space without being directed, starts to organize itself, starts to process things it didn't have time to process when you were constantly feeding it new inputs. And in that processing, in that mental digestion of accumulated experience, calm begins to develop. This is the work that used to happen naturally, in waiting rooms, in lines, during commutes. in those inevitable gaps throughout the day where you had no choice but to be bored. Your mind would use that time to sort through things, to make sense of experiences, to integrate information, to rest from the constant processing of new inputs. That mental housekeeping is essential. Without it, things accumulate. Unprocessed experiences, undigested information, unresolved emotional reactions. They pile up, creating a kind of cognitive backlog that sits in your nervous system as low-level activation. You feel it as restlessness, as an inability to settle, as that constant sense that something needs attention, but you can't quite identify what. Modern life, with its elimination of boredom, with its constant availability of distraction, has made this mental housekeeping impossible. You never have gaps, never have empty time, never have moments where your mind can catch up with itself. So the backlog keeps growing, the unprocessed material keeps accumulating, and that accumulation, that ever-growing pile of unprocessed material, is exhausting. It's also a major source of the perpetual activation that prevents calm. But those moments are rare now. You've trained yourself to avoid them, to see them as wasteful, to fill them immediately. And that training, that reflex to avoid emptiness, is precisely what prevents inner calm from ever arriving. Because inner calm is what happens in emptiness. It's not something you do or achieve or work toward. It's what happens when you stop doing long enough to let your system settle, when you stop filling every gap, when you stop consuming, producing, optimizing, achieving, when you just sit and wait and let the activation gradually dissipate. But you never let yourself sit long enough for that to happen. The discomfort of boredom is too immediate. The pull toward distraction is too strong. So you fill the gap, and calm never comes. There's also the ambient anxiety that's become normalized. It's not always about something specific. You're not always worried about a particular outcome or problem, but there's this background hum of unease, this sense that something could go wrong, that you need to stay prepared, that you can't let your guard down completely because if you do, you might miss something important or fail to prevent something preventable. And that ambient anxiety, that free-floating sense of not being quite safe, keeps your nervous system activated even when there's nothing concrete to be anxious about. It's become a default state, a baseline of tension that colors every moment of supposed rest with a subtle edge of vigilance. Modern life feeds that anxiety constantly. The news is always showing you reasons to worry: climate change, political instability, economic uncertainty, health crises, social collapse, an endless stream of threats, most of which you can't do anything about, but which your nervous system responds to anyway. Social media shows you ways you're falling behind. Everyone else seems to be achieving more, experiencing more, having more. And even when you know intellectually that what you're seeing is curated, that it's not real, your nervous system doesn't care. It registers the comparison and feels inadequate. And that inadequacy creates anxiety, a sense that you're not doing enough, not being enough, not keeping up. And that anxiety keeps you activated, keeps you striving, keeps you unable to settle into any kind of inner calm, because calm would mean accepting where you are, and where you are feels like not enough compared to where everyone else appears to be. The collapse of community has also contributed in ways that go deeper than just loneliness. Inner calm used to be supported by feeling like you belonged to something larger than yourself, a community, a neighborhood, a group of people you could rely on and who could rely on you. That belonging created a sense of security, a feeling that you weren't alone, that if something went wrong, there were people who would help. And that security allowed your nervous system to relax, to believe it could let its guard down because you were part of something that would catch you if you fell. But modern life has dismantled that. You're connected digitally to hundreds or thousands of people, but disconnected physically from almost everyone. You don't know your neighbors, don't have relationships with the people who live around you, don't have a community you're embedded in day to day. You're largely on your own. And that isolation creates a kind of existential anxiety, a sense that you're navigating everything alone, that if something goes wrong, you're the only one who's going to deal with it. This matters more than it might seem. Community wasn't just about having people around, it was about distributed responsibility, about knowing that you didn't have to handle everything yourself, about having systems of mutual support that meant your vigilance could relax because others were also watching out. In a real community, you could let your guard down because the community held security collectively. No one person had to be alert to everything. The group as a whole maintained awareness. Modern isolation means all that responsibility falls on you. You're the only one monitoring your safety, the only one tracking threats, the only one preparing for problems. And that concentrated responsibility means your nervous system can never fully rest, because resting would mean no one is watching and no one else is watching, so you stay vigilant, stay activated, stay unable to relax into the kind of deep calm that only comes when you genuinely believe you're safe. And you can't believe you're safe when you're carrying all the responsibility for your own safety alone. The digital connections that replaced physical community don't provide this, because digital connection is voluntary, intermittent, and unreliable. You can't count on it the way you could count on neighbors who were always there, who saw you every day, who were embedded in your life in ways that created real interdependence. Digital friends can disappear, can ghost you, can be there one day and gone the next. And that fragility means you can't truly relax into those relationships, can't fully depend on them, can't let your nervous system believe they're a stable source of support. So you stay self-reliant, stay isolated, stay unable to access the calm that comes from genuine belonging. The way relationships have changed has made this worse. Friendships that used to provide depth and stability have become shallow and transactional. You're connected to people through platforms that encourage breadth over depth. You have hundreds of contacts, but few genuine connections. And the connections you do have are often mediated by screens. You text instead of talk. You message instead of visit. You maintain relationships through sporadic digital interactions that feel like connection, but don't provide the deep sense of being known and understood that real relationships create. And without that depth, without relationships where you can be fully yourself, where you can be vulnerable without it being used against you, where you can just be present together without performing or curating or managing your image, you're left with a kind of chronic loneliness, a sense that you're surrounded by people but not actually connected to any of them. And that loneliness prevents calm, because calm requires feeling safe enough to be seen, and you can't feel safe enough to be seen when all your relationships are performances. And there's something deeper happening here too, something biological that makes this not just psychologically difficult, but physiologically impossible for your nervous system to navigate. Your nervous system operates on a principle called neuroception, the unconscious detection of safety or threat in your environment. This happens below conscious awareness. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of danger or safety, and it responds accordingly. When it detects safety through physical proximity to trusted others, through predictable environments, through rhythmic, calm interactions, it naturally shifts into a state of social engagement. Your face softens, your voice changes tone, your heart rate variability increases. You become capable of connection, of rest, of calm. But when it detects threat, unpredictability, isolation, rapid changes, lack of safe connection, it shifts into defensive states, fight or flight. Or if those aren't available, freeze or shut down. And the modern environment sends constant threat signals to your nervous system. The unpredictability of always being reachable means threat could arrive at any moment. The isolation of digital-only connection means no safe physical presence. The rapid pace of change means no stable ground. The performance required in all interactions means no genuine safety in being seen. Your nervous system is receiving threat signals constantly,
And it responds the only way it knows how, by staying activated, by remaining in a defensive state, by never fully relaxing into the calm of social engagement, because it never receives the cues that would tell it it's safe to do so. This matters because you can't think your way out of a neuroception problem. You can't convince your nervous system it's safe when it's receiving constant signals that it isn't. You can't talk yourself into calm when your biology is responding to genuine environmental cues of threat. And those cues aren't imaginary, they're real. The environment has changed in ways that genuinely activate defensive responses. The unpredictability is real. The isolation is real. The performance pressure is real. And your nervous system is responding accurately to the signals it's receiving. This is why technique-based approaches to calm often fail. Breathing exercises, meditation apps, mindfulness practices, they're trying to override your nervous system's accurate assessment of threat. They're asking your biology to ignore what it's correctly perceiving, and that works temporarily, sometimes, but it doesn't address the underlying problem, that your environment is genuinely activating your defenses, that the cues your nervous system needs to feel safe enough to relax simply aren't present in modern life. And until those cues return, until the environment itself changes in ways that send safety signals rather than threat signals, your nervous system will continue responding appropriately by staying activated. What are those safety cues? Physical proximity to trusted others, predictable rhythmic interactions, eye contact, vocal prosody, the melodic, soothing tones of safe human connection, physical touch, shared presence without agenda. These are the cues that tell your mammalian nervous system it's safe, that you're part of a connected group, that you can relax your vigilance because others are present. But modern life has eliminated most of these. Your interactions are digital, asynchronous, lacking the real-time rhythmic qualities that create nervous system safety. Your relationships are mediated by screens that eliminate eye contact, physical proximity, touch. Your presence with others is always with agenda, always with distraction, always partial. You're not receiving the cues your biology needs to believe it's safe, so it doesn't believe it's safe. And calm, which requires safety, remains inaccessible. There's also the problem of chronic activation creating physical changes in your nervous system that make calm even harder to access over time. When your system is activated repeatedly, consistently for years, it doesn't just stay activated in the moment, it starts to change structurally. The pathways that trigger activation become more sensitive. The pathways that support calm atrophy. Your baseline shifts. What used to trigger activation only under genuine threat now triggers under mild stress. What used to support calm, quiet, stillness, lack of stimulation, now triggers anxiety because your system has learned to interpret those states as dangerous, as gaps where threat could emerge. This is called neuroplasticity, and it works both ways. Your nervous system adapts to the environment it's in. If the environment constantly activates it, it becomes an activation-optimized system, more sensitive to threat, less capable of rest, quicker to react, slower to settle. And once these changes happen, once your baseline has shifted and your nervous system has restructured itself around constant activation, returning to calm isn't just about changing your environment. It's also about slowly, gradually retraining your nervous system to tolerate states it now interprets as dangerous. You have to sit with the discomfort of stillness, of boredom, of lack of stimulation, of not being productive over and over until your nervous system stops interpreting those states as threat. Until it learns that nothing bad happens when you're not activated, until it slowly, grudgingly, begins to believe that maybe calm is safe after all. And this is hard because every modern structure is set up to prevent you from having that repeated exposure. The moment you feel the discomfort of an unactivated state, there's something immediately available to reactivate you. Your phone, content, work, tasks, obligations, all of it readily available to pull you back into activation, to prevent you from having to sit with the discomfort long enough to retrain your system. So you need more than just knowledge. You need structure, boundaries, protections that prevent you from reaching for activation every time the discomfort appears. And you need time, lots of time. The nervous system retrains slowly, through repeated experience. One session of sitting with boredom isn't enough. One day without your phone isn't enough. 1 week of better boundaries isn't enough. It takes months of consistent practice, months of repeatedly choosing to sit with the discomfort of unactivated states, months of not reaching for distraction every time restlessness appears, months of protecting space where your nervous system can gradually, incrementally begin to learn that calm is safe, that inactivation isn't dangerous, that you can survive, even thrive, in states your current system interprets as threat.
This is why most people don't succeed in reclaiming calm, not because they don't want it, not because they don't try, but because the amount of sustained, consistent practice required to retrain a nervous system that's been optimized for activation is more than most people can maintain while still navigating the demands of modern life. You're asking yourself to do something extraordinarily difficult, to repeatedly choose discomfort over comfort, to sit with states that feel unsafe, to maintain boundaries that will disappoint others, to protect time that seems unproductive, all while still meeting deadlines, maintaining relationships, earning a living, and managing all the other demands that won't pause while you retrain your nervous system. So the question isn't really whether calm is possible, it's whether you can create conditions that allow for the sustained, consistent practice required to retrain your system. And that requires more than just individual choice. It requires recognizing that this isn't just your problem, it's a systemic problem. A problem created by structures and systems that benefit from your activation and suffer from your calm. And those structures aren't going to change because you want them to. They're going to keep activating you, keep demanding your attention, keep preventing the conditions calm requires. The pressure to always be on has colonized even your private moments. You're not just managing your image publicly, you're managing it constantly. Every photo you take is potential content. Every experience is something that might be worth sharing. Every moment is evaluated not just for how it feels in the moment, but for how it might be perceived by others. And that constant curation, that perpetual performance, means you never get to just exist. There's always this audience, real or imagined, that you're presenting to. And presenting requires activation, requires monitoring, requires staying in performance mode even when you're supposedly relaxing. And that performance mode is the opposite of calm. Calm requires letting go of the audience, letting go of the performance, just being here without worrying about how you appear or what anyone thinks. But letting go feels impossible when your entire life has become a performance. Sleep, which should be the ultimate reset, has become another source of anxiety. You're supposed to sleep, but you can't. Your mind won't settle. It's still processing the day, still worrying about tomorrow, still activated by all the inputs you consumed right up until you closed your eyes. You know you need sleep. You know you should be resting, but knowing doesn't help. You lie there, exhausted but unable to power down. And the longer you lie there not sleeping, the more anxious you become about not sleeping, which makes it even harder to sleep. It becomes a cycle, a feedback loop, where the anxiety about rest prevents rest, which increases the anxiety. And you wake up the next day even more depleted than the day before. But depleted isn't the same as calm. It's just exhausted. And exhaustion doesn't give your nervous system what it needs. It just makes you too tired to notice how activated you still are. The way modern life treats time has also made calm impossible. Time has been segmented into smaller and smaller units. You're not working in hours anymore, you're working in minutes, in microtasks, in constant context switching between different demands that each require their own activation, their own mental recalibration. And that fragmentation of time fragments your nervous system. You never get to sustain focus on anything long enough to move past the activation phase into the flow phase, where calm could eventually emerge. You're always in the activation phase, always ramping up to engage with something new, never staying with anything long enough to settle into it. Calendar culture has made this worse. Every hour is accounted for. Every block of time has a purpose, a meeting, a task, an obligation. There's no empty time, no white space on your calendar where you could just exist without a plan or a purpose. And that complete occupation of time means calm has nowhere to develop, because calm requires unstructured time, time that isn't designated for anything specific, where you can let your mind wander, where you can follow tangents, where you can do nothing and have that nothingness not feel like a failure, but feel like space. But space is treated as waste now, as time that could be better used. So you fill it, you schedule it, you optimize it, and in optimizing it, you eliminate the conditions where calm could exist. The performative nature of wellness culture has also contributed to the impossibility of calm. Wellness is everywhere now. Mindfulness, meditation, yoga, self-care, an entire industry built around helping you manage your stress and find your center. But the wellness industry itself is stressful. It creates pressure to meditate correctly, to practice mindfulness properly, to optimize your sleep, to track your mental health, to follow the routines and rituals that are supposed to bring calm. And all of that pressure, all of that striving to achieve calm through technique makes calm even more elusive, because calm doesn't come from trying, it comes from letting go of the idea that there's a correct way to feel or be, from accepting this moment and yourself in this moment exactly as it is, without needing to fix it or improve it or optimize it. But that acceptance is impossible when you're treating calm as another goal to achieve, another thing to master, another area where you could be doing better. And social media has turned wellness into performance too. People post about their morning routines, their meditation practices, their wellness journeys, and what started as genuine sharing has become another competition, another way to present a curated version of yourself that demonstrates you're managing better than you actually are. You're not just trying to find calm, you're trying to appear calm, to demonstrate calm, to prove that you've achieved calm in a way that others can witness and validate. And that performance of calm is the opposite of actual calm. Actual calm doesn't need an audience, doesn't need validation, doesn't need to be documented or shared. It just is. But when wellness becomes content, when self-care becomes performance, the genuine experience of calm becomes impossible because you're too busy performing it to actually feel it. The economic structure of modern life also makes calm impossible. You're not just working to live anymore, you're working to survive, to afford housing that keeps getting more expensive, to pay off debt that keeps accumulating, to maintain a standard of living that requires more hours, more hustles, more side projects. The economic pressure is constant, and that pressure creates an underlying anxiety that never fully goes away. You can't relax completely because you can't afford to. Relaxing means not working. Not working means not earning. Not earning means falling behind. So you work, you hustle, you optimize, and you carry that economic anxiety with you into every moment that's supposed to be rest. It sits there underneath everything else, a constant reminder that you can't actually afford to stop. And that reminder prevents your nervous system from ever believing it's safe to fully let go. The lack of meaningful vacation time makes this worse.
Even when you do get time off, it's not enough time to actually decompress. It takes days for your nervous system to start unwinding from the accumulated activation of months of constant work. But just as it starts to settle, it's time to go back. You never get long enough stretches of true rest to reset your baseline. You just get brief respites that barely touch the surface of how depleted you actually are. And those brief respites aren't restorative, they're just holding patterns, ways to survive until the next brief respite. But survival isn't living, and it's definitely not calm. The way technology has blurred the boundaries between public and private has also made calm impossible. There's no private space anymore, no off-the-record conversations. Everything you say, even in private, could potentially become public. Messages get screenshot, conversations get shared. Things you thought were confidential become content. And that erosion of true privacy means you're always, on some level, performing for an audience you can't see. You can't speak freely, can't be fully yourself, can't let your guard down completely, because you don't know who will eventually see it or how it will be used or interpreted. And that constant vigilance, that awareness that nothing is truly private, prevents the kind of unfiltered expression that used to allow calm to develop. You're always monitoring yourself, always checking your words, always aware that anything you say or do could be documented and used to define you. And that self-monitoring is exhausting. It's also incompatible with calm. Information overload has reached a point where your brain literally cannot process it all. You're exposed to more content in a day than previous generations encountered in months. Articles, videos, podcasts, posts, tweets, threads, newsletters, messages, notifications, an endless stream of information competing for your attention. And your brain, trying to keep up, stays in processing mode constantly, always evaluating, always categorizing, always trying to make sense of inputs that keep coming faster than you can integrate them. There's no moment where your brain catches up, no moment where you've processed everything and can rest. The information just keeps coming, and your brain keeps trying to process it. And in that constant processing, in that perpetual state of mental overload, calm is impossible. Because calm requires mental space, quiet, an absence of inputs where your mind can finally stop sorting and evaluating and comparing and just be still. But stillness is impossible when the inputs never stop. The gamification of everything has made rest feel unproductive. Your phone tracks your steps, your watch tracks your exercise, apps track your habits. Everything is measured, quantified, turned into data that demonstrates whether you're improving or declining. And while tracking can be useful, it also means you're never really resting. You're always working towards something, always trying to hit targets, always evaluating your performance. Even your rest is measured, your sleep is scored, your recovery is tracked. You're supposed to optimize your downtime for maximum restorative benefit. And that optimization mindset, that constant measuring and improving, prevents rest from actually being restful. Because rest isn't a metric. It's not something you score or optimize. It's something you surrender to, something you allow rather than achieve. But surrendering feels wrong when everything else in your life is about control and optimization and achievement. The culture of outrage that dominates online spaces keeps your nervous system activated too. Every day there's something to be angry about, something unjust, something wrong, something that demands your emotional energy. And while some of that anger is justified, while some things genuinely deserve outrage, the constant cycle of outrage keeps your nervous system in fight mode, keeps your stress hormones elevated, keeps you activated and agitated and unable to rest. Because rest requires your system to believe the emergency is over, that the threat has passed, that you can power down.
But when every scroll reveals a new reason to be angry, a new thing to be concerned about, a new injustice to be outraged by, your system never gets the signal that it's safe to relax. The emergency never ends. It just shifts from one crisis to another. And in that perpetual state of crisis response, calm is impossible. The way modern life has made everything urgent has also destroyed the conditions for calm. Everything is presented as time-sensitive. Every email needs a response now. Every message expects immediate engagement. Every task is treated as high priority. And that manufactured urgency keeps you in emergency mode constantly. Your nervous system can't distinguish between real emergencies and manufactured ones. It just responds to the signals of urgency. And when everything is urgent, when every moment requires immediate action, your system never gets to rest, never gets to experience the slower pace where calm develops. Because calm is slow. It emerges gradually when your system has time to unwind, when the pace of life allows for space between demands. But space has been eliminated. Everything is compressed. Everything is urgent. Everything is now. And in that nowness, in that relentless pressure to respond immediately to everything, calm has no room to exist.
So, what do you do when inner calm feels impossible? When every structure of your life works against it? When your nervous system has been so thoroughly trained to stay activated that calm feels foreign? You can't just decide to be calm. You can't force it through technique. You can't optimize your way into it. Because the problem isn't that you're doing calm wrong. The problem is that the conditions required for calm, space, time, silence, boredom, unstructured hours, true rest, genuine privacy, freedom from constant stimulation, those conditions have been systematically eliminated. But they can be recreated. Not perfectly, not all at once, not without going against almost everything modern life encourages, but incrementally, through choices that feel radical because they are radical in a world designed to prevent them. You start by creating boundaries, real boundaries, not flexible ones that you negotiate every time they're tested, but firm boundaries that protect your nervous system from constant activation. You set hours where you're not available, where your phone is off, where messages go unanswered, where work cannot reach you. And you protect those hours fiercely, knowing that without them, calm will never have space to develop. You create transition time, deliberate buffers between work and rest where you're not doing anything productive, where you're not consuming content, where you're just allowing your nervous system to shift states. A walk without your phone, sitting in your car before you go inside, standing outside for 10 minutes doing nothing. These transitions feel wasteful, feel like time you could be using more efficiently, but they're essential because your nervous system cannot shift instantly from activation to rest. It needs time, needs space, needs the absence of demands where it can gradually unwind. And without those transitions, you carry the activation of work directly into your rest, and rest never becomes truly restful. You also have to stop filling every gap. Stop reaching for your phone the moment you feel bored. Stop consuming content during every break. Stop treating every empty moment as a problem to be solved. Because those empty moments, those gaps that feel uncomfortable, those spaces where nothing is happening, that's where calm develops. Not immediately, not as a reward for enduring the discomfort, but gradually, as your nervous system realizes it's not being asked to process anything, that no demands are being made, that it can finally, slowly begin to power down. And sitting with that discomfort, that restlessness, that urge to fill the gap without acting on it, that's the practice that recreates the conditions where calm can exist. You reduce inputs drastically. You unfollow most accounts, unsubscribe from most newsletters, stop checking news multiple times a day, limit your exposure to content that keeps you activated.
Because every input you add is something your nervous system has to process, something that pulls your attention, something that fragments your focus. And focus, sustained focus on very few things, is what allows depth. And depth, staying with something long enough to move past surface-level engagement, is where calm eventually emerges. Not in the doing itself, but in the sustained presence that doing with depth requires. You also have to challenge the optimization mindset. Stop treating rest as recovery for productivity. Stop tracking your sleep. Stop measuring your relaxation. Stop trying to maximize the benefits of your downtime. Because optimization requires monitoring, and monitoring requires activation. You can't track something without thinking about it, can't measure something without evaluating it, and that thinking, that evaluating, that constant assessment of whether you're resting correctly prevents rest from being restful. Rest is not a metric. It's not something you achieve or optimize. It's something you surrender to, and surrendering means letting go of control, letting go of the need to measure, letting go of the pressure to do it right, just being here, without agenda, without goal, without trying to get anywhere or become anything. And you have to be willing to disappoint people, to not respond immediately, to not be always available, to say no to obligations that would fill the space you're trying to protect. Because people will expect you to be responsive, will expect you to say yes, will expect you to maintain the same level of availability you've always maintained. And disappointing them, setting boundaries that they might not understand or appreciate, feels uncomfortable, feels selfish, feels like you're failing some unspoken social contract. But the alternative is sacrificing your capacity for inner calm in service of other people's expectations, and that sacrifice isn't sustainable. Eventually, something breaks. Either your nervous system breaks, or the relationships break, or you break. Better to set boundaries now to protect the space where calm can develop, even if it disappoints people, than to keep sacrificing yourself until there's nothing left to give. You also need to create spaces, physical spaces, that are associated with rest, spaces where you don't work, where you don't consume content, where you don't do anything productive, just spaces for being. And your nervous system needs those environmental cues, needs to learn that when you're in this space, in this chair, in this room, you're not in work mode, you're not in productivity mode, you're in rest mode. And that distinction, that clear environmental signal, helps your system recalibrate, helps it remember that there are contexts where it can power down, where activation isn't required, where it's safe to let go. And perhaps most importantly, you have to accept that calm won't feel like you think it should. It won't be this blissful state where all tension dissolves and you feel perfectly at peace. At first, it will feel like boredom, like restlessness, like something's wrong, like you should be doing something. Because your nervous system has been trained for so long to stay activated that inactivation feels uncomfortable, feels wrong. Feels like something needs to be fixed. But that discomfort is part of the process. It's your system recalibrating, learning that it doesn't need to be on high alert all of the time, that it's safe to power down. And if you can sit with that discomfort, if you can resist the urge to immediately fill it with activity or distraction, eventually, not quickly, not reliably, but eventually, calm will begin to emerge. Not as excitement, not as achievement, but as a quiet settling, a gradual release of tension you didn't even realize you were holding, a sense that you don't need to be anywhere else or do anything else, that this, right here, right now, without improvement or optimization or striving, is enough. Inner calm feels impossible now because modern life has made it so. Because every structure, every incentive, every system is designed to keep you activated, productive, engaged, consuming. Because rest is bad for business.
Calm doesn't drive engagement. Peace doesn't generate revenue. So the entire environment has been optimized to prevent calm from existing, to keep you seeking, scrolling, working, striving, comparing, consuming. And your nervous system, adaptive as it is, has learned to operate in that environment, has learned to stay activated, because activation is what's required to survive in a world that never stops demanding. But that adaptation isn't permanent. The baseline can shift back. The nervous system can remember how to rest. Calm can become accessible again, not through trying harder, not through more technique, not through better optimization, but through creating the conditions it requires, through protecting space, through setting boundaries, through refusing the constant demands for attention and activation, through sitting with discomfort, through allowing boredom, through stopping, just stopping, and giving your system time, real time, sustained time without inputs or demands or stimulation, to slowly, gradually, cautiously begin to believe it's safe to let go. That's where inner calm comes back. Not in the doing, but in the stopping. Not in the achieving, but in the accepting. Not in the striving, but in the surrendering. It won't be quick. The patterns are too deep, the conditioning too thorough, but it's possible. One boundary at a time, one gap you don't fill at a time, one transition you protect at a time. That's how calm becomes accessible again, not as a goal you reach, but as a state you remember, a baseline you return to, a place your nervous system recognizes as home, even if it's been away for so long it almost forgot the way back. But let's be specific about what this actually looks like, because the vagueness of create boundaries and protect space is part of why most attempts to reclaim calm fail. You need concrete practices that directly address the nervous system's need for safety cues. You need rhythmic, predictable activities that send signals of safety. You need physical practices that help your body remember what settled feels like. You need social practices that provide genuine connection. And you need environmental changes that reduce the constant threat signals your system is receiving. Start with rhythm. Your nervous system responds to rhythm. It's soothing at a biological level. Walking at a steady pace, rocking, humming, repetitive movement. These things send safety signals. They tell your nervous system that things are predictable, controlled, non-threatening. Build rhythm into your day, not just once, but repeatedly. A morning walk at the same time, same pace, same route. Not for exercise, not for productivity, just for rhythm. Let your body find its natural walking rhythm and stay with it. Let your breathing sync with your steps. Let your mind wander without directing it. This is different from exercise. Exercise activates. Walking for rhythm settles. The goal isn't to get somewhere or burn calories or improve fitness. The goal is to give your nervous system 20, 30, 40 minutes of predictable, rhythmic input that allows it to start releasing the accumulated activation of everything else. Do this daily, same time, same route. Let it become so automatic that your body starts anticipating it, starts preparing for it, starts associating that time and place with settling. And protect this time fiercely. No phone, no podcasts, no music, no calls. Nothing that pulls your attention away from the rhythm of walking, just walking. This will feel boring, will feel wasteful, will feel like time you could be using more productively. That feeling is your activation trying to maintain itself. Don't indulge it. Walk anyway. Let it be boring. Let the boredom be there without fixing it. Over weeks and months, that boredom will gradually shift. The walk will start to feel less like wasted time and more like necessary time. Your body will start to crave it, will use it to release what it's been holding, will begin to remember what settled feels like. Then build physical practices that help your body discharge activation. Your nervous system holds activation as physical tension in your shoulders, your jaw, your chest, your belly. You can't think this tension away. You have to move it out, but not through high-intensity exercise, which just adds more activation, through gentle, sustained movement that allows release. Stretching, yoga, slow swimming, walking again, lying on the floor and letting your body adjust without forcing it. These practices aren't about achievement, aren't about getting better or more flexible or stronger. They're about giving your body permission to let go of what it's been holding. And this requires you to be present with your body in ways you've probably been avoiding, because your body holds everything you haven't processed, all the stress, all the grief, all the activation that never got released. When you start giving it space to release that, it won't feel good initially. It might feel like crying for nowhere, like anger from nowhere, like anxiety that has no clear source. This is material coming up that's been suppressed, and your instinct will be to stop, to reactivate, to push it back down with distraction or productivity or consumption. Don't. Stay with it. Let your body shake if it needs to shake. Let tears come if they need to come. Let the uncomfortable sensations move through without immediately trying to fix them. This is discharge. This is your nervous system finally releasing what it's been carrying. It's uncomfortable because release is uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. And the more you practice allowing it, the less accumulated material your system has to carry. The lower your baseline activation becomes, the more space emerges where calm can develop. Then address connection. Real connection, not digital approximation. Your nervous system needs co-regulation, the experience of being with another nervous system that's calm and allowing yours to match that calm. This happens through physical proximity, through eye contact, through vocal tone, through shared presence. You can't get this through a screen. You need in-person time with people who can be still with you, who can sit in silence without filling it, who can be present without agenda. This is rare. Most people can't do this anymore. Most people are as activated as you are. But find one person who can. One friend who can sit with you for an hour without checking their phone, without needing to fill the silence with conversation, without needing entertainment or distraction. Just sitting, maybe talking, maybe not. Just being together without pressure. This sounds simple. It's actually revolutionary. Because in that shared stillness, in that mutual presence, your nervous system receives cues it desperately needs. Cues that it's safe, that connection doesn't require performance, that you can be seen without being evaluated. And those cues allow it to settle in ways solitary practice can't achieve. If you can't find a person, find an animal. Animals, especially dogs and cats, are masters of calm presence. They can sit with you for hours without needing you to be anything other than what you are, without judging, without expecting, just being. And that presence, that unconditional acceptance, sends powerful safety signals to your nervous system. Petting an animal is rhythmic, calming. The animal's calm nervous system helps regulate yours. This isn't frivolous, it's biological. It's your mammalian nervous system responding to the presence of another mammal's calm. Use it. Then address your environment. Your physical spaces need to support calm, not activate you. Start with your bedroom. Remove work. Remove screens. Remove anything that signals productivity or obligation. Make it a space only for rest, only for sleep. Let your nervous system learn that this space means calm, that when you're here, you're not in work mode, not in performance mode, not in productivity mode, just in rest mode. Do the same with at least one other space in your home, a chair, a corner, a room if you have it, somewhere that's only for sitting, only for being still, not for reading or watching or working or any other doing, just for sitting.
This sounds absurd in a culture that treats empty time as wasted time, but your nervous system needs places it associates with inactivation, with being allowed to power down, with not having to do anything. Create those places, protect them, use them daily, even if just for 10 minutes. Sit in that chair and do nothing. Let your mind wander. Let your body settle. Let that space become associated with calm, so that over time, just being in that space begins to trigger settling. And critically, reduce inputs. This isn't optional. This isn't something you do when you have time. This is essential. Your nervous system cannot process the volume of information it's currently receiving. The backlog is too large. The activation is too high. You need to dramatically reduce what you're taking in. Unfollow most social media accounts, unsubscribe from most newsletters, stop checking news multiple times a day. Check once, maybe twice. Set specific times. Outside those times, no news, no feeds, no scrolling. This will create anxiety, FOMO, fear that you're missing something important. You're not. Anything truly important will reach you. What you're missing is the constant stream of activating information that doesn't actually affect your life, but does affect your nervous system. And what you gain is space, mental space, emotional space, nervous system capacity that's currently being consumed by processing inputs you don't need. That capacity can be redirected toward processing the backlog, toward actually digesting your own experiences instead of constantly consuming others, toward allowing calm to develop. Also address your work situation, though this is harder because economic constraints are real. But where you have agency, use it. Set actual boundaries around work hours, hours where you're not available, not checking email, not responding to messages, not thinking about work. This will feel impossible, will feel like it puts your job at risk, and maybe in some cases it does. But staying in a state of perpetual availability, of constant activation, isn't sustainable either. Something has to give. Better to set boundaries and see what happens than to keep sacrificing your nervous system's ability to ever rest. And if you can't set hard boundaries, at least create transitions. Don't go directly from work to rest. Build in buffer time, 30 minutes where you're not working but also not trying to rest, where you're just transitioning, walking, sitting in your car, standing outside, doing nothing productive, just allowing your nervous system time to shift from work mode to rest mode. This won't fully solve the problem of work colonizing all your time, but it will at least create some space between activation and attempted rest, which is better than what most people have now. And critically, reduce inputs. This isn't optional. This isn't something you do when you have time. This is essential. Your nervous system cannot process the volume of information it's currently receiving. The backlog is too large. The activation is too high. You need to dramatically reduce what you're taking in. Unfollow most social media accounts, unsubscribe from most newsletters, stop checking news multiple times a day. Check once, maybe twice. Set specific times. Outside those times, no news, no feeds, no scrolling. This will create anxiety, FOMO, fear that you're missing something important. You're not. Anything truly important will reach you. What you're missing is the constant stream of activating information that doesn't actually affect your life, but does affect your nervous system. And what you gain is space, mental space, emotional space, nervous system capacity that's currently being consumed by processing inputs you don't need. That capacity can be redirected toward processing the backlog, toward actually digesting your own experiences instead of constantly consuming others, toward allowing calm to develop. Also address your work situation, though this is harder because economic constraints are real. But where you have agency, use it. Set actual boundaries around work hours, hours where you're not available, not checking email, not responding to messages, not thinking about work. This will feel impossible, will feel like it puts your job at risk, and maybe in some cases it does.
But staying in a state of perpetual availability, of constant activation, isn't sustainable either. Something has to give. Better to set boundaries and see what happens than to keep sacrificing your nervous system's ability to ever rest. And if you can't set hard boundaries, at least create transitions. Don't go directly from work to rest. Build in buffer time, 30 minutes where you're not working but also not trying to rest, where you're just transitioning, walking, sitting in your car, standing outside, doing nothing productive, just allowing your nervous system time to shift from work mode to rest mode. This won't fully solve the problem of work colonizing all your time, but it will at least create some space between activation and attempted rest, which is better than what most people have now. And then there's the practice of doing nothing. This is the hardest one because it goes against everything you've been trained to do, but it's also the most essential. You need regular time. Daily is ideal, but even weekly is better than never, where you do absolutely nothing. No reading, no TV, no podcasts, no music, no scrolling, no productive activity, no self-improvement, nothing. Just sitting or lying or staring at a wall. Just being here with nothing to do and no agenda for the time. This will be excruciating at first. Your mind will present 1,000 reasons why you should be doing something. Your body will be restless. You'll feel anxious, bored, like you're wasting time, like something's wrong. This is your activated nervous system resisting inactivation. Stay anyway. Set a timer if you need to. Start with 10 minutes, then 15, then 20. Gradually build your capacity to just be without doing. And as you build that capacity, something will start to shift. The restlessness will still be there, but it will have less power. You'll start to notice things you didn't notice before. Subtle sensations in your body. Thoughts that have been there all along, but you never had space to hear. Emotions that have been suppressed. And gradually, under all of that, calm will start to emerge. Not as a dramatic arrival, but as a quiet settling, a sense that you don't need to be anywhere else or do anything else, that this, just this, is enough. And finally, you need patience, real patience, not the I'll try this for 2 weeks and see if it works kind of patience, but the this is going to take months or years kind of patience. Your nervous system didn't become chronically activated overnight. It's been trained for years, possibly decades, to stay in this state. Retraining takes time, longer than you want, longer than seems reasonable, but there's no shortcut, no hack, no technique that will give you quick calm. There's only the slow, patient, consistent practice of repeatedly choosing conditions that support calm over conditions that maintain activation, day after day, week after week, month after month, until slowly, gradually, your baseline begins to shift. And even then, even after months of practice, calm won't be constant. It will still be fragile, still easily disrupted by stress, by demands, by the inevitable intrusions of modern life. But what changes is your capacity to return to it. Right now, when something disrupts your equilibrium, it takes days or weeks to settle again. With practice, it takes hours, eventually minutes. You develop the ability to notice activation early and return to baseline quickly, rather than staying activated for extended periods. This is the goal. Not permanent calm that nothing can disturb, but the capacity to return to calm after disturbance. The resilience to settle again quickly rather than staying activated indefinitely. And through all of this, you need to remember that this isn't just your individual problem to solve. The reason inner calm feels impossible isn't primarily because of individual choices or failures. It's because the entire structure of modern life is designed to prevent calm, to keep you activated, consuming, producing, engaged. Every system you interact with benefits from your activation and suffers from your calm. Your employer needs you available and responsive. Tech companies need you scrolling and clicking.
Advertisers need you dissatisfied and wanting. The entire economy relies on you being activated, striving, consuming. Calm is bad for business, so the structures won't support it, won't make it easy, won't accommodate it. This means reclaiming calm is, in some sense, an act of resistance, a refusal to participate in systems that profit from your perpetual activation, a choice to value your nervous system's health over productivity, a decision to protect space for inactivation even when everything around you demands activation. This isn't easy. It requires going against the grain, disappointing people, seeming less committed, less ambitious, less engaged. It requires accepting that you'll produce less, achieve less, appear less successful by conventional metrics. But the alternative is staying in a state that's unsustainable, that's degrading your health, your relationships, and your capacity for genuine experience. And that alternative isn't working for anyone, even if most people haven't admitted it yet. So the choice isn't really between calm and activation. It's between sustainable activation, where you're engaged when needed, but also capable of rest, and unsustainable activation, where you're on all the time until something breaks. Most people are living in unsustainable activation. They're holding on, managing, getting through, but they're not okay. Their nervous systems aren't okay. Their bodies aren't okay. They're just functional enough to keep going, which makes it easy to ignore how not okay they actually are, until they can't ignore it anymore, until something breaks, until the cost becomes too high to continue paying. You can choose differently. You can start building sustainable patterns now before the break happens, before your body forces you to stop, before your nervous system simply can't continue at this pace. It won't be easy, it won't be fast, it won't be supported by the structures around you, but it's possible, and it's necessary, because inner calm isn't a luxury, it's not an optional extra, it's a basic requirement for a nervous system to function sustainably over a human lifespan. Without it, you're running in emergency mode constantly, and emergency mode isn't designed for chronic use. It's designed for short bursts, for genuine threats that require temporary activation. Running it constantly degrades the system, creates wear that accumulates, that eventually becomes damage that can't be ignored. So this work, this slow, patient, unsexy work of creating space, setting boundaries, reducing inputs, practicing stillness, allowing discharge, building rhythm, seeking real connection. This isn't self-indulgence, it's maintenance. It's basic care for a system that's being asked to operate under conditions it wasn't designed for. And caring for that system, protecting it, giving it what it needs to function sustainably is how you reclaim the capacity for inner calm, not as something you achieve, but as something you remember, as a state your nervous system recognizes and can return to when the conditions allow, as home, as the place you're meant to rest when you're not responding to actual threats, as what's underneath everything else, waiting patiently for the noise to quiet enough that you can finally hear it again.